Hey people, it is Thursday, July the 3rd. The time is 4:19 in the afternoon, and it's about 27 degrees Celsius, feeling a bit warmer with the humidex. I am on a very brightly lit King Street East, looking west, and I'm going to continue making my way west along King Street through the financial district. And I'm going to actually do a little walk around Toronto's financial district on this very sunny, warm summer Thursday. And I'm going to be pointing out some of my favorite buildings in the financial district of Toronto and talking a little bit about it. I'm not afraid to say that I love the financial district. It's one of my favorite parts of the city. But many people would tell visitors to Toronto to avoid the financial district, and it's often described as the most boring part of downtown. And I guess that's true in a lot of ways. If you're looking for fun things to do or nightlife, quirky street life, and other aspects of what makes Toronto an attractive city to live in or visit, I guess the financial district is not exactly high on the list of neighborhoods to seek out. But I think it has a lot of interesting aspects to it, especially if you're an architecture buff or a skyscraper nerd. And I think as far as financial districts go, I think Toronto's is one of the nicest, at least in North America. It retains a lot of its history with many old, historic, early skyscrapers with some very awesome newer additions that have been added in over the last 50 years or so. And I was sort of inspired to do this walk around the financial district after I recently visited Ottawa and took a walk around Ottawa's central business district, which is made up of a good chunk of downtown immediately south of the Parliament buildings, and it's filled with office towers full of government workers. And I have to say, as somewhat impressively dense and built up as Ottawa's CBD is, it completely lacks charm, I thought, in that most of the buildings were very boxy and uninteresting, just thrown up in the most basic form possible for the most part, with a few exceptions, of course. I did notice a few nicer office towers in Ottawa. But the street environment was definitely lacking. And I just kept thinking how much nicer Toronto's CBD was. Of course, Ottawa and Toronto are completely different cities in a lot of ways. Toronto is a far, far larger city. That built up an impressive stock of old towers 100 years ago that Ottawa never had the chance to do since it was too small back then. So most of Ottawa's office towers are 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s vintage. I like to walk through the financial district here in Toronto during rush hour because it is absolutely hopping. And I think it's the best spot in the city to get a sort of sense of big city energy at the right time of day. You could just stand at an intersection like Yonge and King here and just watch all the action as people rush home from work or wherever else they happen to be going. As I look north up Yonge Street, it's nice and shady. I'm going to be walking through some shaded spots and some sun-baked spots as I do this walk around. Yeah, you don't see anything like that in downtown Ottawa. I mean, once again, Toronto was a much bigger city back in the 1920s. It's not really fair to compare them in that way, but it was just something that made me appreciate the fact that I do live here in Toronto and I get to have all of this to enjoy as a urbanist and skyscraper nerd. All in all, Ottawa's a great city. I think it's a good capital city for Canada. It is decently urban and walkable in the oldest parts of the city. And I did a bunch of videos while I was there that I'll be posting on the channel. You might have already seen one or two. So I'm not saying there's anything really that bad about Canada's capital. All right, let's just walk around Toronto's financial district here and we'll enjoy some of the sights. I'll try to focus on some of the more historic office buildings. Oftentimes in other walks I point out all the modernist towers that started springing up in the late 1960s through the 70s and 80s and up to the present day. But before that, starting in the 1920s, there was a wave of early office towers that now get lost in the skyline views. They no longer are visible since they're usually hidden by all the much larger modern towers. Even mighty Commerce Court North here is barely visible in most skyline views of Toronto now. That one dates back to 1930-31. Scotia Plaza and its older neighbor here. Some work being done here, some reno work. Alright, we're at King and Bay. I'll take us on a walk down Bay Street a bit later. Walk on this side of the street just to stay in the shade as much as possible. My recent visit to Ottawa, I was completely sun-baked for hours on end. And I also got a good dose of excess ultraviolet rays while I was live streaming the Pride Parade on Sunday. So I'm trying to avoid any more exposure if I can help it. We're walking past First Canadian Place. This is the tallest of the skyscrapers in the financial district. Formerly the tallest in the city, but that has recently been overtaken by One Bloor West up in Bloor, Yorkville. At least it's not excessively humid today. TD Center. And even if you are seeking out restaurants and bars, there are actually quite a few here in the financial district. Many do stay open late. After all, it's sort of a tradition for a lot of office workers to meet up with their workmates after work and have some drinks.
Yeah, it's like towards it, you know?
I just find the overall aesthetic here in the financial district to be very visually appealing, but maybe that's just me. Another urbanist YouTuber recently compared Toronto's urban form to cities like Houston and Phoenix, which I very much disagree with. Even if he was talking just about the financial district here and not the rest of the old city, it's still not accurate in my opinion. If you go on Street View and go around the streets of the skyscraper district or CBD of Houston or Phoenix, you'll find that those streets are much more sterile and unwelcoming than Toronto's financial district, in my opinion anyway. And they're also eerily empty. There's life here in Toronto's financial district. Even outside of office hours, it's not completely dead. So that's right, I'm doing a video basically defending Toronto's financial district from all the detractors, of which there are many. It's worth a look around, in my opinion, if you're just visiting Toronto. Especially if you are a fan of skyscrapers. Approaching University Avenue.
So as an independent organization,
all right, we'll walk up the western boundary here on University. I'll take us up to Richmond Street. Got some strong winds here, which is not unusual in this neighborhood. Given all the towers, it always becomes a bit of a wind tunnel. So at this time of day, most people are heading south to Union Station. Crossing Adelaide.
Carolyn! Carolyn!
Is there a Jays game today against New York, maybe? I don't really follow baseball, so I'm just assuming that's what those folks are dressed up for. All right, up ahead is Richmond Street. Yeah, if you pay attention, there are actually quite a lot of restaurants and bars to be found. They do tend to be quite similar to one another though, I find, especially the bars. All right, let's walk along Richmond for a bit. It's sort of like the northern end of the financial district. Technically it goes up to Queen, one more block to the north. But Queen is a construction site, so we'll stick to Richmond here, which is more really in the neighborhood and not on the edge of it. Busy bike lane here, also on Adelaide, going in the other direction.
Today? There's no fucking way you told me you should just kill yourself.
Actually, maybe I'll go to the other side. It's the bunker-like Sheraton Hotel. Of course, not all the buildings in the neighborhood are much to look at. There are a fair number of clunkers. Little Anthony's Italian restaurant here. There's a food hall. This place is usually pretty hopping. Streetcars making use of Richmond Street and Adelaide now, due to Queen Street being blocked off due to construction. Nice little courtyard here, got some restaurant drink options. This is probably the most boring street in the financial district, if I had to choose one. This, or actually even maybe second most boring, maybe Wellington is the most boring. That's south of King. All right, so let's actually head down Shepherd Street here, just for this awesome shady view. Got First Canadian Place terminating the vista looking south here. I like these sort of narrow streets that are hemmed in. This is a really sort of lower Manhattanish feel here. Got some older buildings mixed in with some newer ones. There's Temperance Street, another shady, narrow street. This is the old Bell Telephone of Canada Company building. The Concourse building, another classic early skyscraper. Although it's just basically a couple of facades now, since it got redeveloped into a modern new tower. So you see the new tower sort of incorporated the old one. You see that a lot in Toronto. It's called facadism. All right, back out onto Adelaide. Streetcars going the other way. Adelaide and Richmond are both one-way streets going in opposite directions.
But
It's an awesome older tower. Gotta get the wires out of the shot. That's one thing Toronto doesn't do very well, is eliminating overhead wires and that sort of thing. Some of them are necessary for the streetcars, of course, but there are still plenty of power cables hanging all over the place on ugly old poles. Guess we just have to accept it. Tokyo is a world-class city that also has tons of wires and poles all over the place, but it doesn't seem to get criticized as much for it for some reason. It's like Tokyo gets a pass just because it's Tokyo, I guess. All right, we're crossing Bay Street, but we're going to take a walk down the Bay Street Canyon shortly, so I won't show too much of it just yet. It is my favorite street in the financial district, though. St. Regis Hotel, formerly the Trump Tower. And the Bay Adelaide Centre on this side. Here's another look at Scotia Plaza. Try to get the wires out of the shot. Step into the bike lane just for a moment. All right, so let's head through the courtyard here. We'll check out a bit of Temperance Street. This is neat. Hang out on some beanbag chairs. All right. Looking east towards Yonge Street. There's a better shot. Temperance Street was recently redone, where they laid down all the interlocking brick. Laid down new sidewalks. Everything looks much, much nicer than it did before. And we're coming back to Bay Street, so I'll do my favorite part of the walk through the financial district, Bay Street at rush hour. We might have missed the busiest time, though, to record a rush hour walk. But it should still be decently hopping with commuters. All right, so there's looking north. We've got Old City Hall terminating this vista. The clock tower there, taller than the Peace Tower in Ottawa on Parliament Hill, which is strange but true. And here's where I see my favorite older buildings here on Bay Street. Some of them have been façademized, such as what I described earlier with the Concourse building, but lots of them are still holding their own as historic artifacts from a bygone era. The Northern Ontario building. I always got a kick out of this, being someone who grew up in Northern Ontario. I wish my hometown in Northern Ontario had a building like that. Fortunately, North Bay was not a big enough city to ever build anything to that scale. 100 years ago, at least. Looks like some work is underway on that old office building you see up there. Now I'll pretend I'm a suburban commuter heading to the GO train to whisk me back to suburbia. What a nightmare scenario that would be. Wanted to try to cross here, but I'm not so sure that's a good idea. Should I go for it? Let's go for it. There we go. Just to get some more views of some classic older buildings here, the Bank of Nova Scotia building. That one was designed and ready to be constructed in the 1930s, but then it was delayed by the end of the 1930s when it was ready to begin construction due to the war. And then after the war was over, they just dusted off the old blueprints and built the building many years later than it was originally meant to be built. So I think it was actually built in 1949 instead of the 1930s. So it has the look of an older building from that era. Because by 1949, 1950, designs had changed and buildings were starting to move into the more modern tower era, moving away from the old masonry buildings. The international style, I guess you could call it, became popular in the 1950s. All right, we're back at King and Bay. We used to have a view of the CN Tower there, but it's been blocked by a newly constructed office building. Right, so we'll head south down Bay. That's right, suburbanites, flee back to your suburban hellholes. All right, let's take a brief walk along the most boring street, I guess. Wellington Street. You can decide after seeing both Richmond and Wellington which one you think is more boring. I think I prefer Richmond only because it does have a selection of some older buildings which give it a bit more character, in my opinion. Royal Bank Plaza. We'll just go down to York Street along Wellington. Can't avoid the sun here. It's comical how many times people almost collide with you. I swear ever since the pandemic, people don't know how to walk amongst other people anymore. It's like our internal guidance systems are broken or something. Everyone's trying to give each other space. As a result, they just awkwardly maneuver and make things worse than if they just maintain their original course. That's just how I sort of see it. I don't know, I might be way off base there. So this is Wellington. You do get to walk past the TD Center here on Wellington, but sort of the less visually appealing side of the TD Center. Ugh. I think I've been doing a pretty good job of staying mostly shaded. Here's the really only standout nice historic building on Wellington in the financial district. There are actually a few more on the corner of Yonge Street which are quite nice as well. Some old commercial storefronts. More facadism there.
People in the simulation.
Oh, look north. All right. Let's head south down to front.
And it just kind of... We've not improved the years. Where are we?
I really want to see like the reaction on alien
I guess I can walk over here. Get a better look at this nice older one. Prudential House. I like the detailing in these older buildings. And the mighty Royal York Hotel. Catch a bus to Billy Bishop Airport. I think it's a free shuttle. Okay, and our first look at the CN Tower. It's not in the financial district, but It is visible from a few spots. Not at King and Bay anymore, as I mentioned, due to that blockage. The blockage. That new building right there. And we got the commuter crush. And here we go, Union Station. The Dominion Public Building just beyond that. The mighty Royal York. Got traffic cops. So I hope you got a sense of why I like Toronto's financial district so much. I mean, I don't necessarily want to work here and be an office drone or anything like that, but I just like walking around during the busy times and admiring the architecture. Just taking in this sort of big city vibe. There are lots of other parts of Toronto where you can get different kinds of big city vibes. If that's more your cup of tea, that's certainly fair enough. I'm going to start to wrap up the walk. Hope you enjoyed a summer Thursday walk around Toronto's financial district.